Welcome everybody to IoT and IP Explain with me, Claudia Tapia, as moderator. This is a podcast which brings you topics related to the Internet of Things and intellectual property, or IP, in an easy to digest manner. Today, we will discuss the importance of building well thought out IP strategies, common mistakes that companies make along the way, key factors to consider when entering the IoT or the Internet of Things, and other relevant topics related to IP strategy. So if you're planning to start a company or want to get some insights on IP strategy, you are in the right place. Joining us today is Magnus Hakvåg, CEO of House of Knowledge, with over 20 years experience in innovation, IP rights, and standards. Magnus, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
Let's start with the basis of IP strategy. For several years, you participated in created guidelines for small and medium-sized enterprises, also known as SMEs, on IP and innovation management. You started this project at CEN, which is the European Committee for Standardization. And I believe this is where we met, since I was also invited as an independent expert to contribute in the project. And then you continued the work at ISO, the International Organization for Standardization. So based on your many years experience, what are the first steps a startup or an SME should take when developing IP strategy?
That is an interesting question. So first of all, and this is, I would say, might be surprising, but first of all, when you want to develop a IP strategy for your firm is learn IP. Not a surprise, but you need to know what you're talking about, and that's where a lot fail. And then the next part would be get an overview of your assets, because you need a starting point before you move towards your heading. And then set a goal somewhere, and then we start establishing the steps from getting from A to B. I think that would be the short answer.
Okay, you're talking about learn IP, but
yes,
many people don't know about IP. So a part of entering the 4IP Council website, what can they do in order to learn about IP?
Well, I would say that it would be good to go in. Well, since you had the 4IP Council, there's a lot of actually good written materials there, which is, I would say, it's quite advisable both in IP and standards and in the combination. And it's good to know that there's more to it than just IP. You can then move beyond the IP and protect it, or you could go with your IP and you can get that into standards, and sometimes you mix it. But you need to get your terminology correct first, because then you could ask the right questions and get the correct answers.
To whom do you raise that questions?
And that's the next part, because if you want to learn something about business and IP, you should talk to somebody who knows business. If you want to learn something about how to protect your inventions, which are technical, you might want to talk to a patent engineer or somebody, a patent consultant. But if your idea is more into the selling products and you have a lot of insights, you might want to move into the trademark domain. Well, then you might want to talk to a lawyer, an IP firm which has lawyers, or you might actually want to talk to a marketing person who knows how you can protect your brand going beyond the legal protection. And then there's, of course, protecting yourself in behaving nicely, because that's an essential part of the trademark IP is your reputation.
How do you build it?
So how do you build it? So first of all, you need to know who you are and whom you want to be for others. And everything you do and everything you say needs to correspond to the image they will have of you in their head. And the only way to protect that image they have of you is behaving nicely, or the way you solve your problems. Protecting the name or the logo, that is a legal task. So those are actually two different ways of protecting it, and those are two different skill sets. So then there's the marketing people, and then there's the lawyers. And sometimes you need both, and sometimes you need neither.
You're talking about behaving nicely.
Yes.
What do you have in mind?
So behaving nicely would be if you as an individual are representing a company, if I'm being rude, that reflects back on the company. If I'm an individual and I'm using, let's say, a uniformed car, a car with a logo, and I'm behaving badly in traffic, meaning I'm driving aggressive, well, people will reflect that onto the logo of the company. So they will associate this kind of behavior with the company. If the company does things that others assume is being unethical and immoral, well, that also rubs off on the company. So that's kind of behaving nicely. And sometimes you're allowed to do errors, but then there's all about how do you counter your mistakes? You're allowed to make mistakes, but then you need to show that you learn from them and actually do something with it. And
I like
actually
this
mean
perspective.
it. Yeah.
And actually mean it. Yes. Marketing alone is not going to help you.
No.
You know, I recall the first time we talked about this topic, you were talking a lot into focusing on competitiveness
Yes.
and that this depends on what you do. So could you provide some input on this?
Yes. So competitiveness is, and protecting your competitiveness is going beyond just protecting your inventions, which I can do with a patent. I can protect my access to the market, which means I need to be engaged in standards or make sure that elements are present in the standards or engaging regulations. So that's part of it. Or I might, if my core asset is my reputation, I need to focus on that. And when I'm doing the competitiveness element, I need to look into anything that is a competitive advantage for me and see how can I protect that. And that goes way beyond the IP law. It goes beyond the marketing. It also go into, at least when you're a small company, proper budgeting, because you need the assets to go through with your strategy. That's part of a holistic mix.
I'm hearing budget and I'm thinking about how often I have heard small and medium enterprises complaining about not having enough money and not really wanting to invest in IP, and what then has led to missed opportunities with investors or getting infringement that they cannot stop, although they were the ones having the idea. So what would you tell to those who are complaining about how expensive it is, IP?
I will ask them, do you own a car or a house? Do you have insurance? Do you think it's stupid to have insurance? Would you drive a car without insurance, knowing that if you crash without insurance, you're bankrupt the rest of your life? That's an investment. And I need to take that investment, or else I might want to buy a cheaper car or not having a car. It's kind of the same thing. If you're in business, you need to do the proper investments. It's a hard trade-off, but you need to do it. And if not, you might as well do something else, being a bit blunt.
Yeah, that's why I love to talk to you. Things very directly expressed. No doubts whatsoever what is meant here. I think one important element too is all the support that startups and SME can get. I mean, there are plenty of initiatives. If I'm looking, for example, the EU IPO, all the support that they have with different projects. I think right now is running this IP scan when they can work with experts, and so they are really some support that they can obtain.
Even financial support for obtaining trademarks, which is not to forget, that is really a good initiative.
Yes, indeed. We did a webinar time ago in Forepi Council when we invited EU IPO, and we jointly had these discussions about what all the benefits that they have. So I strongly recommend you to go and figure out which are the possibilities that you may not be considering right now. We're moving into the Internet of Things, and we see a lot of sectors now collaborating that they never had anything to do with each other, because being things more connected, we see telecoms cooperating with health, with transportation, with energy, with whatever sectors. I believe startups can play a key role in the Internet of Things because they come into these specializations that we not always see in large companies. And I would like to talk about two aspects. Maybe let's start with a consortium. When does it make sense for a startup to join a consortium? And first, maybe explaining what it is.
Yes. So a consortium is let's say, shorter. It's a collection of companies or entities, organizations that cooperate achieving something specific. And normally those consortiums are used when applying for funding from the European Commission, like the Horizon program, which is the largest research program on the planet. There's a lot of money to get. And in order to solve the task which they are addressing, you collect a lot of specialized firms. And then we have a consortium agreement to regulate between us who's doing what, who's getting paid for doing what, and who owns the results, and who owns the initial starting point of the insights they have. And using consortium, that's a consortium.
And when it's interesting for startups to join, and when it's better not to join?
It's very interesting to join when there is opportunity to work with interesting firms that you might actually learn something from. And if you get those projects, there's a lot of free money. You get up to 100% financing, and you can use it to develop your capabilities. You learn a lot from the partners. You get a lot of dissemination of your results. You get into contact with new businesses, but you could use it to develop your capabilities in the form of people, their skills, but also the IP. And then jointly as a consortium, you could try to jointly get those into the relevant standards of whatever you're developing within this consortium. So it's a way of ramping up what you do, but there's a multiplier. The number of companies, there are some huge companies that might help you drive, and you could just fall in behind them, and they are kind of your windscreen.
I hear a lot of visibility, money, connections. Any downside?
Oh yeah, you need to know what you're doing. So we started out with, I said, do your inventory. Because if you don't know what you bring to the market, and you throughout this consortium develop something new, let's say it's some new technology, but if you never declared what you did before you started, what you do and what you owned of IP before you started might be mixed with the results. And there's unclarity of who can make use of and monetize the results, which means that you just lost control of your IP.
I imagine we are in a consortium, and I have kind of the core technology of my company, and I put it there as one of the ideas, and then the consortium is built on that. And I may have signed an agreement in which I give away any IP I shared with the group. That would be a major impact in this consortium. So understanding IP, at least to the extent of what are you bringing and how is later on the use of that IP, who owns it, who can use it, it's key.
Yes. We also need to add in an element there is that when you are looking at results, we need to agree in the beginning who can do what with the results. And if my company gives access to my IP, as you said, we need to control who can do what with what I brought into the consortium. But at the same time, I need to make sure that to able to use the results I invested time in, that I have the access rights to whatever the other partners brought into the consortium, so I can monetize the results. And that goes for all the partners.
What about bilateral collaborations? Let's say a startup, large company. What do each of them need to consider when they are collaborating regarding IP and maybe business too?
Well, if I were the large company, I would maybe ask the small one to show that they are capable of sustaining and not going bankrupt while we're partnering, because that's an investment for me. So the behavior of a large company, they might want to be a bit more smoother on the edges on payments, stretching out a hand, because they might lose their investment if, they are too rigid in their structures. Looking from the startup's point of view, for example, dealing with a large one just on the monetized part, is that understanding in advance that they have huge administrations. Things takes time. There's anti-corruption element that enters into the processes. So they need to understand entering that doesn't mean money at once. That will take time. You need to take to agree on this. And then, of course, there's all the IP elements on top of that.
Indeed. Let's imagine you have two companies cooperating and one company has been the one putting most of the money, then will likely get also more patents, but you still need to have access to the results. So sometimes companies decide to split the patents, or one of them gets the patents, but the other gets access to these.
Yes.
Why is this so relevant?
Well, one of them is agreeing what to happen when you let's part after this cooperation, that we're friends afterwards, and that I'm capable. It's like having a car and you own the wheels of my car. I need the right to be able to use those wheels, or else I can't drive my car. It's the same thing. I need the access to be able to use. I need an agreement making sure that I have the access rights to use the assets I need to monetize my results, which might be the rest of the car. But if I actually own those tires or not doesn't really matter. What matters to me is that I can make use of them. And sometimes if you're in partner with a large entity, if they own but you have access and maybe get some, let's say, financial results from licensing, you also gave them the not the rights, but they also have the obligations to protect those and enforce those, which means there's less risk on you. So there's pros and cons. But there's another issue for the small company. Investors would like to see that you own rights and not only have the access to. So that is kind of a balance you need to figure out yourself.
Makes absolutely sense. You have been working with companies for so many years. You were talking about mistakes and how important it is that you learn from those. What are the typical mistakes you have seen startups doing in relation with IP?
Wanting stuff to happen too fast. They are too impatient. And when you're impatient, you do wrong stuff. Having difficulties to relate to the needs of using formal structure like a non-disclosure agreement, which might be good and sometimes not. And then there is the nowhere to talk about what to whom.
I think this is key. Could you elaborate a bit?
Yes. So if I'm talking to my accountant in the firm and just doing it internal in the firm, they don't need to know all the technical specifics of all the inventions of the firm. They need to know the figures and full stop. And then for the same going to the engineers, they don't need to know all the specifics or the specifics of the budgeting, but they need to know what they need to know of budgets to be able to do their job and to exchange perspectives and insights with their colleagues to develop what they're doing.
If I look at typical mistakes, I think there is some misunderstandings, for example, with trade secrets. We have it here in the company, and then it means that it's protected. While if you put information which is sensitive on the table without really any, and everybody has access, that will likely not classify as a trade secret. I've seen now companies giving some kind of training to new employees, but also from time to time going to departments and remind them about the need to keep relevant information confidential. I think this is key.
Oh, yeah.
Especially because I think it's kind of counterintuitive with the engineering mindset, which is collaboration, sharing, building things together. And what many don't understand is that you can collaborate if you have protected your IP. This is what is going to give you the possibility to share with others if you have, unless it's of course a trade secret, but other than that, if you have a patent, you can then go to meetings and bring that idea, share them, get some revenues through the licensing agreements. But understanding what needs to be protected, how it needs to be protected, I think it's super relevant.
And just saying, also adding when, because that is a key mistake startups do, is they run too fast and they patent too early, and the invention is not mature enough, which means that they try to patent something which is not really at its peak, it's not at the quality they need, and they start burning money too early, which is not really good.
No, it's not. But when should they know when is the right? Because you say at its peak, but when is that moment? Who should tell them? How can they do that? I mean, we need to help them.
Yes,
Magnus.
and that is key, because when you're a startup, you think that I need to patent. Let's say I invented this electric cup. Okay, but it's not ready yet. I have a prototype. But if I want to do that on an industrial scale, because I'm now selling not 2 cups here, I'm going to sell 1 million cups. I need to, well, and that's what a lot of startup misunderstands. You need to redesign this product to be on an industrial scale. And that's where you should start patenting, because now you learned a bit more and you can move on. Because what you need to know is that your early patent is prior art. So your early patents will shoot down your opportunity to get the patents that you really wanted, where you need to add something. But alone, this new element you add is not innovative enough. So this is knowing, and that is really difficult. And that's not really a clear answer to it. But you need to at least done more marketing tests and engage more relevant stakeholders to be able to give you the appropriate feedback. So you know that there won't be any needs for more changes.
And in the meantime, while you still haven't protected, let's say with a patent, and you're talking externally with others, that would be a good moment to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Yes.
To make sure that this confidentiality is kept and disclosed as minimum as
Absolutely.
This is always risky. How are you going to prove if you have been showing the idea everywhere, right?
and then if you use it too much with the too large audience, that kind of backfires, because then it's too many people already having access. But what is essential, stealth using NDA, if let's say there's 3 aspects of my invention, and I'm talking to a software engineer on the software aspects of it, I don't have to know really the need to share the other 2 aspects, because they just need what they need to solve their job, which means I sold an NDA, but still I need to differentiate what I share under the NDA. That reduces my risk substantially.
Important consideration. Is there any other main mistake that you can think right now regarding IP?
It's actually what they don't do, and it's the lack of structure. Startups, and I would say inventors, they're more like hippy happy, jumping around like a happy rabbit, and that doesn't really cut it. Those who are successful, they have a structure to it. They have a systemic and systematic approach. And the reason you want to do that is that you can learn from your mistakes, because everything you do is to learn something. And that's where the startup have as an advantage versus a large one. They can do a lot of these try and errors and fail. And the big benefits of failing is learning. You need some structure. And without structure, you're not learning. And the other element of structure is you're growing. With some structure, it's easier to onboard new people to a structure than an absolute chaos.
I think this is such an important point. I have seen startups failing because they kept the same way of acting and organizing that does no longer fit when they grow.
No.
Which leads me to the next point, which is what you provide in your business. I've been seeing in the last year these serious games that you do with this House of Knowledge company, and you come every year with my team, have a lot of fun, but it's great opportunity for us to do brainstorming in relevant topics. And I'm thinking, if you are building a business and you have a team, or even if you are growing, and you may need to rethink your processes. Or with the IoT, that is continuously new things coming, and or AI. So there's so many things that could happen. Also geopolitical challenges, let's say. Again and again, we face new challenges. Could you tell the audience what is that you do and
Yes.
why you think it's relevant
No.
for this?
So I'm going to introduce a word called stickiness first. So if I'm going to convey a lot of information to people and I give them too much information, it's going to just flood through and it's going to clean out what I already knew. I got confused, and in 2 months, I remember absolutely nothing. If I would show you how to apply that, you will remember slightly more. But if you actually made use of the information, but then I reduced the amount to what is necessary for you, so I could learn step by step, building on what, and linking that to what I normally do, I can comprehend it and made use of it, and it's being part of me. And the stickiness, which means what I remember in 2 months, is about 100%. That's the difference. It's an applied training. It's kind of a simulation where I learn from my colleagues and we can exchange perspectives and I learn who knows what. And that's kind of the building the team part. It's an applied game or a simulation where we have programmed a dialogue to make you experience something that you will remember.
Oh, yes. I recall last year, I don't know if you remember, we had like the same game, but 2 different groups.
Yes.
And it was so interesting to see how they came out with very different strategies.
Yes.
Both groups really interesting, but each group was very surprised about how the others were thinking and which decisions they took. So it was a great exchange afterwards to see the different strategies and what could lead and the benefits and disadvantages. So I thought it was really inspiring.
And the fun part, just building on that, is that what we learn is that diversity is a huge power because you got more inputs. And that's the beauty of those groups. They were slightly different. They got different backgrounds, and then you end up with different results. Putting those together, and you will have even the third approach to it. That's the fun part.
So thanks so much for sharing, Magnus. But before you go,
yes,
I would like, because you were talking today about the fact that, you know, we all make mistakes, but that this should be used as an opportunity to learn from it and do it better. Do you have any story for us to share about lesson learned?
To have a lesson learned from myself is that when engaging in negotiations, expect that people are nice. So when I ended up being angry in a meeting, it was completely unnecessary because my expectation and understanding of what they're saying was something else. And I didn't take the time to breathe and reflect on what might I have wanted or intended to say, and there was miscommunication. And there's a lot of miscommunication going on because I didn't breathe and reflect and think what might you have meant, because there was a misconception when you are in a multicultural discussions. So that was a brutal learning point that I was actually misbehaving, even though I didn't intend to, but because I misunderstood and give the other the best of my thought, what I might have been. I immediately thought that was something else, that was an attack, but it wasn't. That was me having a misconception. That was a brutal learning point, that be nice and think the best, and normally they meant the best too.
This is a great advice and a very important lesson learned. I love the way you always finish your emails. Would you like to share with the audience? Because I remember the first time I saw it, I thought, oh, that's really nice.
Yes, so what I do in the emails is that the email, I might actually add a smiley because it's ending up being very harsh. But then the personal part is where I enter at the end is life is good or enjoy the day, because that's me. It's positive. The other part is kind of technical. And then can kind of be more personal, but it's more positive, kind of shining out that, you know, regardless how shitty the world is, you need to think it's good, or else you'll go down with it. So smile, and that's the intent. Life is good.
Life is good. And with that, wishing you and the audience a great rest of the day and enjoying life as it should be. I would like to thank you for coming and share all your insights, also to the audience for joining us today. As always, comments welcome. Please feel free to send them to ipwithclaudiatapia@hotmail.com or just in LinkedIn under Claudia-Tapia. And I hope to see you very, very soon. Thank you.
See you. Bye.